I want to begin first of all, thank you all for inviting me. It's a pleasure and a privilege to be here, and I'm hopeful that this will be a very productive conversation and talk. I want to begin my presentation with two warnings. First, those of you who have a science background may think that some of this discussion will appear simplistic, and this is by design. Please bear with me. My hope is that everyone will have some understanding of the big picture, and I have learned that if you get into the weeds of scientific explanations, those who don't have a science background will start to get a glazed look on their eyes and start to nod off. And that leads me to my second warning. I have been a practicing anesthesiologist for 34 years, so I am used to having people fall asleep in front of me. But I hope to avoid that today. So the Greek word apologia means a formal defense of an opinion or a position or an action. And it is the root word of apologetics, which is the defense of the Christian faith. This is a biblical mandate by the Apostle Peter to study apologetics. 1 Peter 3:15 is pretty well known. Always be prepared to make a defense to anyone who asks you for a reason for the hope that is in you. But they sometimes leave out the last part of that verse. Yet do it with gentleness and respect. We know what we believe as Christians, but I study apologetics to know why I believe, and then so that others may also believe. Christianity is an evidence-based religion. Some people think we study apologetics to defend Christianity by winning the argument, like in a court of law. Just wanted to see if I had the right audience here. But you don't want to win the argument. You want to win the man or the woman. So ultimately, we are commanded, as always, to be ready to answer the question, why are you a Christian? And remember, it is very hard for someone to change their worldview or a lifelong belief. So treat them with gentleness and respect, and I might add a little bit of patience. So I was asked today to talk about divine design, which is an integral part of Genesis. So let's ask ourselves a simple question. How is it that we are all sitting here today? To answer that, we need to ask an even broader question. How is it that human beings came into being? Well, there's just two choices: chance or design. That's it, either or. Now, you've heard a lot about intelligent design, which is a scientific movement that claims to show evidence of design in nature without resorting to the Bible in support of the evidence. Because in every instance we know of, whatever is designed has an intelligent mind as its cause. But the ID movement stops short of identifying the mind, because science cannot show that. Well, sorry, I have no problem identifying the mind. It's the triune God, the creator of the universe, the God of the Bible. So I'd like to walk you through a discussion of a couple of topics pertinent to our existence or how we got here, starting at the beginning, and then ask you all, which is more likely, chance or design? Did everything come about on its own, or is there a designing mind behind it? Before I start, let me give you a quick primer on large numbers because it will play a role in the discussion. If you were to begin counting right now by seconds, how long would it take you to count to 1 million? Anybody know? It would take you about 11 and a half days. About a week from this coming Thursday, about 11 p.m., you would finish counting to 1 million. Now, we used to think that being a millionaire was a big deal, but now apparently they're a dime a dozen, according to the news. You have to be a billionaire to be special now. So if we begin counting by seconds, how long would it take you to count to 1 billion? Any guesses?
3 years. 2 years.
37 and a half years. Probably most of us in the room wouldn't make it, okay? Yeah. Okay, let's talk about the national debt. How long would it take you to count to 1 trillion?
Longer than it would take.
37,500 years.
That's how long it's gonna take for them to pay it back.
Exactly. Jesus walked the earth about 2,000 years ago. By the way, the current national debt is about $31.3 trillion, give or take a few billion. So you get some idea just how large these numbers are, okay? 1 million, 1 billion, 1 trillion. Extremely large. So let's talk about our universe. Now, I was able to look through the excellent slide presentation that Don Hamilton did for this class regarding the young Earth versus old Earth discussion. I'm agnostic on this. For my part, I'm going to use the old Earth numbers that say that the universe began 13.8 billion years ago and that the Earth was formed about 4.5 billion years ago. And while I may be repeating some parts of Don's presentation, I find the story fascinating. You see, for many years, scientists believed that the universe was eternal. The first law of thermodynamics says that the total energy in a closed system can neither be lost nor gained, only transformed. In other words, energy can neither be created nor destroyed, only changed. And we know this because of Einstein's most famous equation, E equals mc squared. E stands for energy, m stands for mass, and c stands for the speed of light squared, which is a very large number. But what this equation basically tells you that mass and energy are interchangeable, that enough energy can form mass, and if you break down mass, it releases energy. So it's kind of static, and the scientific consensus at the turn of the 20th century was that the universe existed in a steady state, and it was eternal. It had always existed. Then, in 1927, a Belgian priest, who was also a professor of physics, who was also an astronomer and mathematician and a decorated World War I soldier. His name was George Lemaitre, and he first proposed an expanding universe based on Einstein's general relativity calculations. Einstein refused to accept his conclusions, and fellow scientists felt uncomfortable as well. Why? Hold on here. Then, in 1929, astronomer Edwin Hubble found evidence, not just calculations, that the universe was expanding. As celestial bodies have traveled further away, the light that they emit takes a longer time to get back to you. And as a result, it lengthens into the ultra-red spectrum. And this red shift confirmed that the universe was expanding. Why was the expanding universe so controversial? Because now you can rewind the tape and work backwards mathematically. And as they did so, it was discovered that matter could be getting closer and closer together, that space would be more tightly curved, and that matter and energy would be getting more tightly concentrated until you reach a literal point of infinite density and infinite temperature, out of which time and space in our universe was born. They call that point the singularity, and at that point, all physical reasoning becomes impossible. Before that, there would not be matter or energy or space or time. So you can't explain the origin of the universe as a material cause because matter and energy came into existence at that point out of nothing. So the universe had a beginning, and that had theistic implications. And that made the scientific community uncomfortable. Because if the laws of physics can be condensed out of existence, then there is a limit to what science can tell us. In 1964, final evidence of a Big Bang was discovered. The model predicted that there would be a microwave afterglow of background radiation left over from the Big Bang. And astrophysicists Arno Penzias and Robert Wilson discovered evidence of this radiation, for which they both received the Nobel Prize. It was no longer debatable. The universe had a beginning. Now, question, What was Jesus' greatest miracle? Anybody know? Yes. The first one. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The most well-known sentence in all of literature and the foundational statement of the Judeo-Christian worldview. And it's packed full of information. The universe was not eternal. It had a beginning. The heavens and the earth were brought into existence by a creator, and that creator was identified as God, and God was separate from his creation. What is fascinating is that this was written by Moses sometime in the mid-15th century BC, about 1430s BC. In other words, it took about 35 centuries for science to confirm what God revealed to Moses. And Jesus was there. How do we know that? We know that from the prologue of John's Gospel. In the beginning was the Word, and that's logos in Greek, which can have several nuanced meanings. The first meaning is that it infers the acts of creation in Genesis where God spoke things into existence. If you remember in the creation story, and God said, "Let there be light." And God said, "Let there be an expanse separating the waters." And God said, "The earth sprout vegetation, fruits, and plants." And God said, "Let there be fish and birds and land animals." And God said, "Let us make man in our own image, after our likeness," the image of God, the imago Dei. More on that later. The Word of God also gives an understanding to the prophets concerning the mind and will of God. And finally, the Word of God also refers to a participant in the divine order, distinct from the material and historical world. The Word refers to Jesus. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, the incarnation, Jesus. That life was the light of all mankind. And here's the most reassuring thing. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. If you read that statement 100 years from now, it's going to say, the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. We are going to win, in other words. Final confirmation occurs in John 5:46, where Jesus says, "For if you believed Moses, you would believe me, for he wrote of me." So, the universe explodes into existence. I thought this was pretty cool. Thank my daughter for finding that. There should be chaos, not order. But out of this blast of energy, space, time, and matter come into existence. We think of a bomb, when we envision this, we think of a bomb exploding in space, right? But there was no space. Space inflation had to expand faster than the speed of light so that mass and energy would have something to expand into. And time, as we know it, began at the point of creation. And from that initial blast, everything we know of the universe, the laws of physics, the atoms on the periodic table, the planets, the stars, the asteroids, our solar system, and our galaxy, and you and me. We all came into existence from that one blast of energy. Is that chance or design? Which brings us to our home, right? Once upon a time, it was possible to believe that we could exist anywhere in the universe, that life could exist anywhere in the universe. And we assumed that life probably did exist on many planets. since there were so many stars and planets. It only followed logically that there must be plenty of life out there. Also, we all watch Star Trek. Apparently, miniskirts were fashionable for cosmonauts of the future. And the crew encountered some very curious varieties of life throughout the universe. Amazingly, they all seemed to be remarkably human-like. So it would only be a matter of time before we found them, or they found us. But the more science learned about the conditions necessary for life, the more the idea that life existed anywhere at all seemed increasingly miraculous. It didn't make sense that we existed, yet here we are. Things had to be exquisitely, precisely perfect for this one planet to be our home. In September of 1977, NASA launched Voyager 1, which was a robotic spacecraft, to study interstellar space. When it had gone past Jupiter and Saturn, it took a series of 60 images to produce a family portrait of the universe. So you will see the pictures that it took of each of the planets. It only didn't get Neptune because it hadn't got that far yet. This is the photograph that it took of our home. Taken by Voyager 1 on Valentine's Day, 1990, almost 13 years from the time Voyager launched, and it was at a distance of 3.7 billion miles. The photo was named The Pale Blue Dot after a book by the astronomer Carl Sagan. In it, Sagan reflects on the significance of the photo. Consider that dot, he says. That's here. That's home. That's us. And by the way, most everyone in this room, except for my daughter and son-in-law, were on that dot when that dot was taken. Sagan continues, on it, everyone you love, everyone you know, everyone you ever heard of, every human being who ever was, lived out their lives there. The aggregate of our joy and suffering, thousands of confident religions, ideologies, and economic doctrines, every hero and coward, every creator and destroyer of civilization, every king and peasant, every young couple in love, every mother and father, hopeful child, every teacher of morals, every corrupt politician, every superstar and supreme leader, every saint and sinner in the history of our species lived there, on a mote of dust suspended in a sunbeam. That's beautiful writing. But Sagan was an atheist. He was marveling in awe of everything that happened by chance on this little insignificant pebble in a massive universe of space and celestial bodies that is otherwise extremely hostile to life. And to make this insignificance more pronounced, here is where we are in where our entire solar system is located in our Milky Way galaxy. And many cosmologists believe that there are trillions of other galaxies besides ours. So to Sagan, we are an amazing cosmic accident. But of course, there's another way to look at this. You see, Jesus visited that pale blue dot as God incarnate to reconcile mankind to God and to himself. That fact alone grants a special status to earth. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. It doesn't say, in the beginning, God created the heavens. It says it created the heavens and the earth. So perhaps the universe is hostile to human life, but Earth is uniquely hospitable, designed with precision by a creator God for all his creatures and for man, who he created in his image. What do I mean with precision? Well, some of you may not know, but this is called a radio. Remember when you had to turn that knob to precisely tune to the radio frequency that would bring in the clearest sound, and if you were just slightly off either way, The music would go away completely. Well, in the same way, there are several factors that have to be exactly what they are, or you and I wouldn't be having this discussion. We live in a Goldilocks environment. Let's look at a few of these necessary coincidences. There are basically only 4 fundamental forces in nature: gravity, which we are all familiar with, electromagnetism, and the final 2 are only apparent on an atomic level, on atoms: the strong nuclear force and the weak nuclear force. All 4 of these fundamental forces have a fixed value that was determined less than 1/1,000,000th of a second after the Big Bang and has never changed. And each of these forces must be precisely what they are, or the universe would not be able to support life. Let's look at 2 examples. The electromagnetic force. This is a hydrogen atom, the first and simplest element formed after the Big Bang. This is how it's presented in basic chemistry text: 1 proton in the nucleus and 1 electron in the orbit around it. This would be a more accurate representation. Think of a large soap bubble with the proton the size of the tip of a needle in the center of the bubble, and the electron at a distance equal to where the soapy film is. Of course, you don't see a film, it's just that that's where the electron would be, somewhere on where that film would be. Now let me blow your mind. If you could blow up the proton to the size of a golf ball, the electron would be somewhere near the Galleria from here. The electromagnetic force holds the electron in its orbit around the nucleus, which has 1 proton, and that force is precisely calibrated. If it was slightly weaker, it wouldn't be able to hold the electron in the orbit, and they would leave too easily, so you would have no atoms formed. If it was a little bit stronger, the electron would never budge from its orbit, so no molecules could form. This is a molecular Mickey Mouse, okay? It's also called water. So at the center is the oxygen atom, and then the 2 hydrogens on each side, and you can see how the electrons have to be able to get out of their orbit and share the orbit of oxygen to be able to form water. If it couldn't do that, no water could be formed. It turns out that Yoda was right. The force really is with us. So let's talk about the strong nuclear force. This is a simple drawing of that oxygen atom, which is essential for life. And it has a soap bubble within a soap bubble, if we are going to use the same analogy, with 8 electrons orbiting among the two orbits. In the nucleus, there are now 8 protons and 8 neutrons. Now, the electromagnetic force holds the electrons in their proper orbit. What holds the protons and the neutrons together? That's the strong nuclear force. If it was weaker, slightly weaker, it wouldn't be able to hold the nucleus together, and the protons and neutrons would fly apart, leaving only 1 in its place, 1 proton. So that means only hydrogen, the one in the far upper left, the simplest atom, that would be the only thing that could exist. If that strong nuclear force were stronger, it would attract more protons and more neutrons, so you would only get the heaviest atoms and elements, which are in the lower right-hand corner. And it would completely bypass the ones that are kind of a teal color or a light teal color. I can't really see. Things like carbon, oxygen, nitrogen, the things that are essential for life. So in other words, there would be no life. Let's look at the size of the Earth. If it were a little bit smaller, the magnetic fields around it would be weaker, and there are solar winds coming from the sun continuously, streams of charged particles that would strip away hydrogen and oxygen, and therefore water, from the atmosphere. So Earth would be more like Mars. If Earth was a little bit larger, it would create a more powerful force of gravity so that water and methane and CO2 would be unable to escape the atmosphere, and air would become too viscous to breathe. So no life could exist. And finally, let's look at the energy density of the universe, otherwise known as the cosmological constant, or Einstein's cosmological constant. It's the most fine-tuned example yet discovered. This constant was part of Einstein's general relativity equation that showed an expanding universe. If 1 out of 10 to the 120th power, which is 1 followed by 120 zeros, if it was only off by 1, we would not exist. A trillion is 1 followed by 12 zeros. This is 1 followed by 120 zeros. It kind of makes your head hurt. So imagine that you had a coin, that you could give a coin to everybody on the planet. There's roughly 7 billion people on the planet, and they could all flip them at the same time, and what would be the odds that only one would come up ahead and the rest would be tails? Could that have happened by chance? Or is it more likely that someone configured the coins so that only one would come up ahead? Well, we were the planet that came up ahead. And this is what let me see here. Yeah. So I think I get out of order there, sorry. So this is what a Cambridge astrophysicist, mathematician Fred Hoyle said, who, by the way, he's an atheist. A common sense interpretation of the facts suggests that a super intellect has monkeyed with physics, as well as with chemistry and biology, and that there are no blind forces worth speaking about in nature. The numbers one calculates from the facts seem to me so overwhelming as to put this conclusion almost beyond question. Most atheists have concluded that the fine-tuning argument is the most persuasive for the design hypothesis. Now, all right, and so I gave you 4 examples of the fine-tuning, but what if I told you, and they were precisely calibrated where they needed to be, what if I told you there were over 200 of these calibrations, or these things that need to be precisely what they are? And what if I told you that out of the 200, if you walked to any one of them and you just turned it one click either way, that we would all disappear? So think about that. Now, to counter all of this, the theoretical physicists have come up with something quite novel: the multiverse. Since our universe came into existence out of nothing, why couldn't a multitude of universes have come about the same way? While the odds of our universe being so perfectly fine-tuned by chance seems impossibly low, if our universe was just one of an infinite number of universes, it would make it more theoretically probable that ours was the lucky one to be so finely tuned as to allow for life to arise. So in other words, they tried to increase the probability that it wasn't impossibly low for us to come into existence. Of course, there are major problems with the concept of a multiverse. First, there's no way to know that other universes exist. And if there's no way to discover whether they exist, then the theory is philosophical and not scientific.
Yep.
Second, even if there were other universes, how did they arise? And how do we know that there's an infinite number of them? So you can see how scientists twist themselves into theoretical knots to avoid having to acknowledge a theistic possibility. So why does it matter? The serpent said to the woman, "Did God really say you must not eat from any tree in the garden?" The woman said to the serpent, "We may eat fruit from the trees in the garden, but God did say, you must not eat fruit from the tree that is in the middle of the garden, and you must not touch it, or you will die." Oh, whoops. Oh. "You will surely not die," the serpent said to the woman, "for God knows that when you eat from it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil." When the woman saw that the fruit of the tree was good for gaining wisdom, She took some and ate of it. This led to the fall of man. Eve and then Adam believed the serpent and disobeyed God. Disobedience to God is the story of fallen man and continues to this day. Adam and Eve thought they would know what God knew, that they would be all-knowing and wise like him. But they could never be omniscient like God, because the creation cannot be equal to the Creator. To this day, man has continued to seek omniscience through science, particularly in the study of the cosmos. Scientists seek discovery rather than revelation. If you make a scientific discovery, you become famous. It's all about you. If it's revealed to you, it's all about God and his amazing creation. Science cannot answer the fundamental questions of life. Why am I here? What is my purpose? And where am I going? What most scientists are desperate to show is that the universe and life on Earth all happen spontaneously, that the origin of life, of DNA, of evolution, and of consciousness all arose on their own by natural processes, because that would put an end to the need for a creator. But think of what that means. They want everything to have arisen by chance. They want to cut the connection to God rather than cultivate it. They want to be autonomous instead of worshiping the God who created the heavens and the earth and who brought us into existence. It is the story of man from the fall until today. So chance or design, you decide. Thank you for your kind attention.